What's up, guys? Welcome back to the MMA meeting. Let's talk the Weasel podcast, where we talk all things MMA, and there's a lot to talk about. So we got some fights that have been moved around a bit. Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush was scratched because Oliveira had an injury, but they're not going to have a replacement for Beneil Dariush. Instead, they're just going to grab that whole fight and move it somewhere else, which really tells us that it's an important fight for the division, and the UFC knows it. If they would have put a replacement, we know that possibly that the fight would not be that number one contender fight. But the fact that Oliveira and Dariush seem to be the top two guys outside of Islam Makhachev, it looks like the UFC is going to have the winner of that fight for the championship. And it's crazy because UFC 288, which is what that fight was supposed to be on, went from like a B+ card to like a C- immediately. Once that fight got scrapped, the card does not look nearly as good. I mean, I'm going to be honest, Oliveira versus Dariush was easily the best fight on the card, but Sterling and Cejudo is also really good too. The other fights are Jessica Andrade versus Yan Xiaonan, Bryce Mitchell versus Jonathan Pierce, Kron Gracie versus Charles Jourdain. Those are all good fights. Drew Dober versus Matt Frevola is an insane one. Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Devin Clark. Chaos Williams versus Rolando Bendoya. Marina Rodriguez is on the card. Phil Haas is on the card. So it's actually really good. It was like a B+, almost an A tier card. But now it seems like a C. I was really looking forward to Oliveira and Dariush. And Dariush came out and said some very interesting things, like he was told that Dustin Poirier is the number one contender, so he has to fight Charles Oliveira in order to take over that spot. I think he was confusing himself a little bit when he was told that Dustin is the number one contender. I think what they were saying was, right now, yes, Dustin is the number one guy, and you have to beat Oliveira to get over him. I think that's what they were telling him instead of saying Dustin Poirier is getting the next title shot. That's what Dariush was thinking. Dariush was thinking that Dustin is going to fight Islam next because they pretty much told him that they want him to fight Oliveira. And they also told him that if Oliveira doesn't show up next time, Dariush is getting the next title shot. So that's what it seems like right now. They want that fight to happen. All the fans want to see it. And that should be really entertaining. So they're pushing it back to June, which is not too far away. It's only 2 months. And the winner of the fight probably is going to get a title shot. But it is pretty interesting because Dustin Poirier was the guy that turned down Dariush, right? He turned him down twice, which is pretty crazy. But he also kind of said that Dariush is the next guy in line. So at least he's not jam-packing the title shot there. He's admitting that he's not the next guy in line. Instead, he wants to fight someone else, and Dustin is actually very eager to fight someone right now. He went out and said that he wants a fight. And Gilbert Burns put his hand up. He said, I'll fight you. And Dustin said that he's not in fight shape right now, but for the right money, he would fight Gilbert Burns. That lightweight division is just so weird, man. And we have to give so much credit to Beneil Dariush because this guy's willing to fight anybody. He even told the brass that he's willing to fight Renato Moicano and Arman Tsarukyan because Oliveira pulled out. That's how much of a fighter this guy is. But is it business savvy? No, because his managers told him, don't ever say that. Yeah, his manager literally told him, do not call out Moicano, do not call out Arman Tsarukyan. The only guy you want to fight right now is Charles Oliveira, unless they give you a title shot. I mean, could you imagine if they threw him someone like Renato Moicano or Arman Tsarukyan or something, and then he derailed himself from a title shot whereas someone else can fight Charles Oliveira? Yeah, so we have to give Beneil a lot of respect for willing to fight anybody, but where he's at in his career, he also needs to be intelligent with who he fights. And the other fight that got moved, or at least they're saying that it's going to be, is Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic, which was originally planned to happen in July, but now they're saying that it's going to happen in the fall, and I'm hearing it's because of Jon Jones and not Stipe. Jones is saying that he wants to fight in New York for his retirement fight. He wants to finish his career with beating the greatest heavyweight of all time. I honestly rather see Sergey Pavlovich versus Jon Jones than Stipe these days, and I might make a whole video about this, but the age is there. I mean, 41 years old for Stipe is quite underwhelming. It's not as interesting. So that means that Jones versus Stipe is not going to happen for UFC 290. So let me see. That card, no, 289 is Nunes versus Pena 3 for some reason. I mean, it's going to be another Nunes beatdown again. I guess in that division, nobody else really deserves it too much. Everyone's like right next to each other with it. And I guess Pena versus Nunes sells more than if you do like Holly Holm again or whoever else. And they're headlining UFC 289, which is something. And then UFC 290 is the July card. This was supposed to be the big one. And right now, all they have is Brandon Moreno versus Alexandre Pantoja, which makes perfect sense. Those two have to fight each other. Pantoja actually has 2 wins against Moreno. He's 2-0. And both guys have gotten so much better ever since. It's not just Moreno that got better. Pantoja also got a lot better too. So it's not like Moreno should be easily winning this fight at all. Let me actually see who's the favorite. Okay, Brandon Moreno's like a 2-1 favorite almost. That's pretty insane for a guy who's lost to this guy twice. But solid fight, right? And then the other fight so far is Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez. So it seems like that might be the cap for title fights on UFC 290. They're going to have Bo Nickel versus Trishan Gore on the card. That's actually a big step up in competition for Bo Nickel. But Gore is more of a striker than anything, so it is still a tailor-made matchup for him stylistically, but it should be tougher than anyone else he's fought so far. And Deiveson Figueiredo versus Manel Kape. He's still at flyweight. What is he doing? He announced that he was going to go up to 135. I don't understand this staying at 125 thing, and he's going up against Manel Kape, who's number 9 in the rankings. This is like a lose or nothing scenario. He gains nothing here. Even if he knocked out Manel Kape in the first round, it doesn't help anything for himself. All he gets is money and a win, which he could do against pretty much anybody. Manel Kape's a dangerous fight. That guy's a monster. Why would the number 1 contender, who just had the title, want to fight the number 9 contender in a division that Deiveson could barely make healthy anymore? The guy's 35 years old. He looks like he's going to pass out at the scale every single time. And these weight cuts are not getting easier. He would actually have a better track to the title if he went up to 135 in terms of like a fresh new division with fresh new contenders. He lost to Brandon Moreno twice. That's over. He's not getting that fight anymore. I don't understand why he's staying there. By the time he goes up to 135, it might even be too late. Imagine the scenario that he gets like dropped by Manel Kape or knocked out or something. There goes all aspirations for 135. He's hurting his cardio, hurting his chin by trying to make this weight. He's doing just as much damage to himself as his opponents are. And I don't know if it's because he needs to be the weight bully. Is that his whole mentality? He has to be the bigger guy in there. If that's the way he sees these fights, if that's the only way mentally he can see himself winning, then he has no chance at 135 for sure. But it makes no sense why he's staying there. But in other news, we got some more stuff on Alex Pereira. That 6-month suspension that we were all looking at is now a 60-day suspension, so it's 2 months. And that changes a lot of things because Pereira said that he wants to get into the octagon as quickly as possible. He wants to get right in there and get right back to the win column. It's going to be at 205 pounds, and the landscape at 205 is a little bit interesting. Like I mentioned in my video when I was going through all that, of course, Jamal Hill's a champion. Yuri Prochazka is number 1. Then you have Magomed Ankalaev, Jan Blachowicz, Alexander Rakic, and Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith is the only guy out of them that actually has a fight right now. He's going to be fighting Johnny Walker. He should win the fight. The other guys do not have a fight. Alexander Rakic is still injured. We don't know when he's going to come back. Jan Blachowicz and Magomed Ankalaev already fought each other in a pretty dull fight that went to a draw, and nobody wants to see that fight again. And then, of course, when Yuri comes back, he should probably get the title shot first. But we don't know exactly when he's going to come back. He said he wants to come back in the summer. Maybe August, September is probably where he's going to be looking to make his return. And then whenever he does, he should fight Jamal Hill. But that's where this all kind of comes down to. When does Yuri Prochazka want to come back? If he comes back later, it leaves room for even Alex Pereira to get the immediate title shot against Jamal Hill because he is the biggest name. And with a guy like Alex Pereira who can actually draw attention to the weight class, it wouldn't be shocking to see him get an immediate title fight, especially with the storyline that Jamal Hill defeated Glover Teixeira. There is something to sell there. I don't want to see that immediately because I want to see him go up against a guy a little bit worse than Jamal Hill for his first fight after getting knocked out like that and in the new weight class. So I actually would like to see him win one time against someone in the top 5 and then get a title shot after that. And then Yuri Prochazka in the meantime should get the title shot against Jamal Hill. And I was asking, which fighter do you want to see Alex Pereira fight? And it seems like most people are saying the winner of Anthony Smith versus Johnny Walker because it seems like that is the easiest fight for him other than Yuri or Jamal Hill. Like Anthony Smith and Johnny Walker are not really going to take this guy to the ground, or at least it's going to be very hard for them to do it. Anthony Smith does have some underrated takedowns here and there, but for the most part, those guys get obliterated on the feet, and I could see Alex Pereira knocking either of those guys out. Neither guy has a good chin. Anthony Smith has a lot of heart. His nickname matches it too. Both guys do not take a punch too well, especially Johnny Walker. Could you imagine another Looney Tunes knockout? Alex Pereira touches him with the left hook, and Walker goes flying across the cage. That's what would happen. The best case scenario for Alex Pereira to get that title shot is if Johnny Walker beats Anthony Smith and then he fights Pereira. Pereira knocks him out in the first round, which is actually very likely to happen, and then fights Jamal Hill or Yuri Prochazka, whoever has the title. And I like his chances against either of those guys. Both guys are dangerous and they have a great chance of beating Pereira, but those are not as hard for him as like Magomed Ankalaev, Jan Blachowicz, or Alexander Rakic are. Those 3 guys could definitely take him to the ground and just do bad things to him. But with the fact that nobody wants to see Uncle I versus Blachowicz, we might see Pereira get one of those two. And if he has to choose one of those two guys, it better be Jan Blachowicz, because at least he will entertain the striking. He'll try to beat you there. And we see in how he fought Israel Adesanya, it was pretty close, but it is more of a doable fight for Alex Pereira for sure. Oh wait, Khamzat Chimaev is saying that Paulo Costa is running away from him. So it looks like the fight may have been in the works, and now Khamzat's saying that Costa's not taking it. Jan Blachowicz said the same thing about Costa, and Costa didn't take the Whitaker fight way back. And now it's Costa saying that Blachowicz turned down the fight. And if I'm going to believe either guy, I'm going to believe Jan. Costa probably thought Jan could come down to 185 or something. What's Paulo Costa doing, man? When was the last time he fought? He's legitimately been fighting once a year since 2018. He fought once in 2018 against Uriah Hall, once in 2019 against Yoel Romero, once in 2020 against Adesanya, once in 2021 against Marvin Vettori, and once in 2022 against Luke Rockhold. And it's looking like he's going to have one fight or no fights in 2023. And didn't he just get like a new deal? I don't understand that. He got a new deal that's apparently paying him more than anybody, even more than Oliveira and Pereira somehow, and he's still not taking fights, which means one or two things. Number one, it's not true. He didn't get that kind of deal. Or number two, he's still drinking too much wine. I don't understand. Khamzat is a guy coming up from 170, one of the biggest names at 185, right? It's one of the biggest money fights for Paulo Costa. It's actually a pretty good fight for him. Like, it's a doable fight. He has good takedown defense. He has good striking. He's a really big guy. Like, he can make things happen against Khamzat, and they have history with each other that they can promote. There's no logical reason for him to turn this down because he has the deal already. He has the money. There's no more money to negotiate here. He already did that. Wow, this is getting really disappointing. This whole thing where like nobody wants to fight each other. This is happening a little too often now. I mean, I've been watching the sport for a long time and it didn't used to happen like this. This is happening much more than I've ever remembered. Hopefully they get those two to fight each other. Hopefully that goes down. And it looks like with everything involved, I don't know, man, that middleweight division is not looking too fun right now. And I think it's a big reason why people were so upset with the fact that Pereira lost is because he made that division so fun, right? All the matchups that could be put on with him were interesting, right? There were new matchups and he's a dangerous guy that can make a lot of things happen. But with him out of the division now, it just like looks a lot lackluster. You got the same thing happen again. Whitaker, Adesanya are just so much better than everybody else. Khamzat's trying to come up, but some guys don't want to fight him and he doesn't want to fight some guys. And it's a very strange place in that division right now. So honestly, right now, Khamzat's the guy that can make the division fun. But if someone does not accept that fight, and if he doesn't accept it, I don't know what's going to happen in this weight class. You're going to see Whitaker and Adesanya fight like 10 times. I'm all up for it, but I like to see new guys do something here, you know? Leon Edwards is also saying that he's not going to fight in England. He's looking to fight in Abu Dhabi, which leaves a lot of time for some stuff to happen in the weight class. Which means that also Colby Covington, it'd be a year and a half since his last fight. And I don't know why Leon wants to move forward to Abu Dhabi instead of fighting sooner. Maybe get prepared more for Colby or something. I don't really understand it. Khamzat's probably going to be removed from the rankings, which means that Belal is going to be number 3, Gilbert's going to be number 4, and Shavkat's going to be number 5. Oh, and we have to talk about this Nate Diaz situation. So he's gotten himself into another incident, we'll say, with a Logan Paul lookalike. So this guy's name is Rodney Peterson, and he's a TikTok guy that looks just like Logan Paul. He's like the same height, everything. Like if you saw him on the street, especially with glasses on, you would not be able to tell that's not Logan Paul. But before that, Nate just got into like a bit of a thing in the Misfits boxing event with some influencer boxer or something like that. He threw a water bottle at him. For sure, you got to take water bottles away from Nate Diaz. I mean, he has those in ammunition wherever he goes for some reason. It seemed like it spilled out into the street because this Rodney Peterson guy was also at that event when Nate threw the water bottle. So now it's outside, and Nate puts this guy into a guillotine and puts him to sleep. So Nate is absolutely at fault for that. Why is he getting into fights with civilians? And he has a fight lined up with Jake Paul, and I think he's actually getting pressed charges against. So yeah, Nate takes all the blame in this. But with the other guy, he needs to take some personal responsibility for his own safety. At least have like some kind of common sense here. Because I see a lot of people saying, you know, the guy didn't want any issues, right? He had his hands up. He's like, hold on, I don't want any problems and stuff. And it did look that way, but why? Why was he walking at Nate? What was he doing? Why did he have to let this agitated, known troublemaker with his fist balled up and his back to the wall? Why did he just have to let him know that he didn't want problems? Nate Diaz did not single this guy out. This guy walked up to Nate, and boxed him in against a wall. He limited his space. It's like that caged animal analogy, right? You don't stay in front of a cornered person like that, you know? You just walk away, man. Don't go up to the guy. Hey there, Nate. Big fan. Yo, I just had to let you know, man. I don't want problems. I saw you and your buddies are into some kind of quarrel over here, man. And I just had to come all the way over here to sincerely let you know how much I don't want to fight you. There's no point in walking up to Nate, man. I seen some of this Roddy Peterson guy's videos, and he seems like a really cool guy, very positive guy, so nothing against him, but man, he put himself in harm's way. Have some common sense here. I know there's people saying, oh, you should be able to walk where you want without getting into a fight, but you also have to know how not to put yourself in harm's way. Get away from the situation, man. Get away from the hostility. Like, I had people telling me Nate shouldn't be that way. He shouldn't want to get into fights. He shouldn't be such a bad person. And this other guy should be able to walk where he wants without getting into a fight. I agree. Everyone should be a good person. Everybody should be a saint. But you got people who look for fights. There are going to be people like Nate Diaz. You can try to walk in some big city with a rack of cash and telling people how they shouldn't be snatching that from your hands, but that's not going to stop it from happening. We should all wish the world should be in a certain way, but you also have to be practical in the world that you live in. What good does saying, hey, Nate is a bad person, Nate was this and that? That doesn't do anything, right? That's why I don't care to talk about how much of a bad guy Nate Diaz was, or stuff like that. I'd rather give advice or talk about normal people so they don't find themselves in a fight. Like back when I was talking about the Mike Perry thing, I know some people had the same kind of criticism. I'm like, why would I care to talk about Mike Perry? Mike Perry's going to get into fights regardless of what anyone says. I'd rather talk more about the guy who put himself in that situation with Mike Perry. Same thing here with Nate Diaz. I mean, Nate Diaz was backed up. His back was to a wall. Why the heck is this guy walking at him? Get away. You have all this space to leave. You could just be with the crowd, but instead he wasn't. For some reason, he's also a TikTok guy, so maybe he wanted attention. And if that's the case, he got the wrong attention he was looking for. And I think the guy even shot a double leg at him after Nate grabbed his hands, and then Nate put him into an instant guillotine. I mean, it was just wonkiness. A lot of people were trying to defend the guy. The only way I could defend that guy, it seemed like he didn't want any issues in the beginning, but that's it. Everything else he did was completely idiotic. And of course, Nate Diaz, I mean, it's not news anymore. Nate always finds himself in those kind of situations. I mean, in like the last year or two, he's at like 3 or 4 or 5 incidents. Like, this is nothing new about Nate Diaz. He did this stuff way back in the day, years and years ago as well. Like, this is not a new thing anymore. And you don't have to know who Nate Diaz is. This guy didn't need to know who Nate Diaz was in order to not put himself in that situation. Have some common sense. You see a guy is clearly agitated with his fist balled up, ready to go at it, and his boys are already scrapping around. Don't walk up to the guy. Walk away from the guy. If you guys seen the video, all those other people in the crowd were not standing in front of Nate for a reason. This guy should be blending in with the crowd. That's what it should be. And do you know what's pretty funny? I think Nate actually thought that was Logan Paul, because the guy honestly looks just like him. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Nate thought he put Logan Paul into a guillotine, because he is actually going to fight Jake Paul, and there's been a bit of a back and forth between them two and stuff like that. And whenever Nate has a scheduled fight with somebody, his crew is always going to be there to have his back. So that was to be expected. But let's go to the questions here. We're going to start with Simply Pump, an OG in the comments. Ariel said that Bellator's 205, 185, and 170 champions could beat UFC champions, and he said you could also make a case for 145, 155. Do you agree with this? And how do you see these fights going? Always love the podcast. Keep up the good work. I like Ariel, but man, what? He must have Nate Diaz in the studio and they have been smoking some up, because there's no way he thinks that. 205, 185, 170, and then 145 and 155 can? Anyone can, but let's see these champions. Let me see for sure. Vadim Nemkov, who's a 205-pound champ, could he defeat Jamal Hill? He actually can. Vadim Nemkov is very good. He has a good wrestling style. He's good on the feet too. I think Jamal Hill can have some problems with him, but I can also see Jamal Hill beating him too. Jamal Hill has a really good takedown defense. The middleweight champion is Johnny Eblen versus Israel Adesanya. I think Eblen has somewhat of a chance because he is a very good wrestler. He is undefeated. He was a D1 wrestler, and you do see it in his fights against guys who aren't great at grappling too much, besides Gegard Mousasi's decent. but he doesn't do anything too special. If he doesn't hold Adesanya down, he's going to get destroyed. I mean, his striking is so rudimentary compared to Adesanya. Adesanya has good takedown defense against the cage. He showed that against good wrestlers like Derek Brunson, even Robert Whittaker a couple times. Marvin Vettori tried to take him to the ground, had a hard time there too. And I can potentially see Adesanya sniping him coming in. You can have an argument for Eblin if he uses his wrestling correctly, but I still go with Adesanya. Then for the welterweight division, Yaroslav Amosov versus Leon Edwards. I got Leon Edwards for sure. Yes, Yaroslav Amosov is a good wrestler. He has good submission wins. He's a good judo artist, good sambo. And you see his ability to hang on to the opponents and scramble with them, but he doesn't have the best takedowns, right? He doesn't have the kind of takedowns that Colby has or even Usman has sometimes. And he will entertain the striking a lot more than he should. He's had some really close fights. He got out-wrestled by Logan Storley. Logan Storley is actually a very good wrestler, but we see a lot of his takedowns get defended and not even chain wrestled after. A lot of these guys would defend his takedowns and create space against him. And then he'll strike with you, he'll pressure you here and there, but I do see Leon win this by a decision for sure, or a late TKO, as it does look like Yaroslav gasses in the later rounds. Then the lightweight division is Usman Nurmagomedov versus Islam Makhachev. Usman's good, but he's not beating Islam. And then Patricio Pitbull versus Volkanovski. No, I definitely go with Volkanovski. The lightweight and featherweight take are definitely not true. I can see how the light heavyweight champ at Bellator can beat the UFC champ. The middleweight champ is going to have a hard time, and then the welterweight champ I think loses. And then with the Nick Beatty, top 5 Pulse Championship losing streaks ranked. Also, just watched Gaethje and Fiziev, and Justin looked really good. What do you think about his striking in that fight, particularly the third round, where he started landing a bunch while making Fiziev miss a ton? Love your channel, man. Thank you so much, man. Now, I don't really know exactly what you mean by top 5 Pulse Championship losing streaks ranked. Is that like who had the most losses after losing the belt kind of thing? Like Hanan Barao or something? But I don't know how to rank that. And then as for Gaethje and Fiziev, both guys actually looked really good until Fiziev was really starting to gas out. And Gaethje was landing the jab, he was landing the uppercuts. Gaethje was landing the jab, he was landing the uppercut. It's crazy how he found that shot in the middle of the fight and was losing the early parts of the fight because he wasn't throwing it. Insane how 1 or 2 punches can change the whole trajectory of a fight. And it also looked like Fiziev was really small. Clinching up with Gaethje like that, I think was also putting a toll on him. Because Fiziev looks like a blown up featherweight, if we're going to be honest here. Like, he looks like a featherweight that has too much muscle on him. And Gaethje never looks that big in front of anybody. I know he's been working out, he's been lifting weights, and you could tell he put on more muscle, especially in his back. His back muscles were popping out there, but he didn't look that much bigger. Fiziev looked tiny in that fight. He definitely had a major speed advantage. He was landing really good body shots, was very evasive in the pocket, and landing good counters on Gaethje, even hurt him in the fight. He'll land like a left hook, Gaethje would try to swing back, Fiziev would roll with the punch, causing it to miss, and then counter immediately back at Gaethje. It was crazy. It was actually some of the best in the pocket work I've ever seen in a fighter. Until Gaethje started setting it up with the jab, and then he was starting to land the uppercut. And he was being a lot more disciplined, and he actually got a takedown. The second and especially the third round was some of the best work we've ever seen from Gaethje. It was one of the best we've ever seen him look. And especially if he can mix up his takedowns the way he did against Fiziev there, he's so much bigger of a problem. And I'm glad he finally got that out there. He did attempt a takedown on Eddie Alvarez. A lot of people forget about that. The takedown he shot on Fiziev was not the first one he shot in the UFC, but it was the first one he was successful with. And I'm glad he was successful with one of them because I hope it shows him that he should be doing it more. Mix it up a bit. People think like wrestling's boring. No, wrestling's only boring when you're laying on top of them. If you could take the guy to the ground and then destroy them with elbows and ground and pound, it's just as fun to watch as striking. That's what Gaethje should be chasing more. Not, oh, I'm going to take you to the ground and hold you down. I think that's the idea he gets in his head when people say that he has to wrestle. But he doesn't have to do that. There's a lot of things you can do with your wrestling. Or you could start like faking takedowns and then land uppercuts. Imagine how much easier those uppercuts would have landed if he was faking takedowns on Fiziev. They would have been much more devastating. Yeah, man, but it is a bit tough for Fiziev. He's kind of caught in between 2 divisions, it seems like. It is weird to see in his record because he had some catch weight fights above 155. But he just doesn't look that big. I mean, he is muscle bound. He has a lot of muscle on him. But you can lose some of that, you know? You don't need to be so heavy in the muscle. And it really hurts his cardio. He's gassed out more than once in his career. And he doesn't seem like he has the power to knock someone like Gaethje or some of the higher guys up in that lightweight division with one punch. He throws his punches that way. He throws to knock you out with one. But as you see in the Gaethje fight, he doesn't have the kind of power to do that. I think at 145 he would have it, but not 155, right? He can knock out an old RDA who's been in the game for like 50 years, you know? Like, you can hurt that relic. He's really good still, but it's not surprising he was able to knock that guy out, or hurting Brad Riddell with a spinning kick to the head. I mean, you can knock out anybody with that. He can hurt a light heavyweight with a kick like that. But when it comes to his punches, which is still some of the finest technique in all of the UFC, he throws like he's trying to take you out, but he just doesn't have the horsepower at 155 to do it, which hurts him because that's his style. His style is to knock you out, and it's crazy because it's hard for him to actually do it against bigger guys. And then went to Sam Wise Gamgee. Hi Weasel, please give us your prediction on the tentative Umar Nurmagomedov versus Merab. Also, do you think the submission attempt against Mokaev by Filo back in UFC 286 would be tolling in Muhammad's career? Kudos for the great content. Keep it up, man. Greetings, Desde Mexico. Thank you so much, man. And shout out to Mexico. It's a really good time in MMA for you guys. Umar and Merab would be a very interesting one. I think Umar just has better striking overall and really good takedown defense. I think both guys have good enough takedown defense to not get taken to the ground or at least held down. It would come down to who can get a submission attempt in there, which I think Umar's more craftier at, right? I think he's much better at actually catching submissions inside of scrambles. And he also has better striking overall. He's faster, he is bigger, he's more athletic, and he is younger learning. So I definitely like Umar in that fight. But man, the wrestling back and forth would be crazy to watch. 50,000 takedown attempts in the fight. It'd be so exhausting to even watch it. And as for Mokaev, well, we just got word that he is good. He had a partial tear, so it wasn't too bad. I don't know how. Like, the guy's knees are made of rubber. His knee was bent backwards, like your arm bends forward. It made no sense. I don't know how he just got a partial tear. I was like sure that he was not going to be able to come back the same. And then they just say he had a partial tear. And he's able to come back even this year. Well, good luck to everybody else that wants to go for a knee bar against this guy. It's like irrelevant. What's the point? You're not going to tap him out. If his leg's bending at a 90-degree angle, like how much further can you go? Then we go to Mwangi. Hello, Weasel. Much love and respect from Melbourne today. Do the UFC know the rankings past number 15? Like, do they know who the number 20 featherweight or number 35 lightweight is? I actually don't know. I think after number 15, they're kind of just winging it of who's actually just doing good. That's kind of how it was before the rankings were even a thing. They were just looking at, okay, who's winning? Who's having good performances? Okay, we'll give them a title shot. And I think they still go with that feeling only outside the top 15. So, like, you knew for a long time that Drew Dober was right outside of it, right? He was like probably number 16, 17. And now he is finally in the top 15. So I think it's kind of like a feeling and how people are performing rather than actually ranking them. I think with John Jordan, women's flyweight seems to have finally caught up with Valentina. With women like Grasso, Santos, Blanchfield, Barber, etc., who do you see holding the belt by the year's end? We all thought that Valentina was not going to lose that belt in a very long time. Now, she did hold it for a while. She held the belt for 4 years and 4 months. Defended it 7 times. Valentina and Nunes both have 7 title defenses. There's no wonder they are the 2 greatest female fighters of all time. But yeah, it's crazy to think about that the division has finally caught up to her. And it's not a one-off thing. It's not just Grasso, right? Grasso caught her and that's it. Taila Santos brought it to her too. At least with Nunes, it was kind of a fluke win in a way for Pena. In Valentina's case, it's not the same. These girls are actually on her level now. And it just shows that the flyweight division is better than the bantamweight division, which I always thought it was for a while. And a lot of these girls can actually beat each other. Now, who do I see holding the belt by the end of the year? Well, Valentina is going to get her immediate rematch. I think the winner of that fight will hold the belt by the end of the year. Or there'll be one more fight. So who do I have winning? Valentina or Grasso? Well, there is that whole thing with the confidence of a new champion, but sometimes it's actually that the former champion or the fighter who just lost the belt performs worse in the rematch. It's very hard to pick between Valentina and Grasso because Valentina was winning the fight. She was doing pretty well, and she was losing only to the 1-2 from the southpaw stance, and someone as savvy as her should be able to make the adjustments to not get hit by the simple 1-2 that often. Maybe she even switches stances and does something a bit different, or shoots takedowns even earlier in the fight because her takedowns were very effective against Grasso. But Grasso is going to be working on takedown defense going into the fight, so there is a lot riding on in the preparations rather than only what they did previously. What is easier to do? Is it easier to defend the 1-2 from southpaw, or is it easier to defend the multiple different kind of takedowns that Valentina gets you down with? You know, the double leg she showed in the fight, she gets you down in the clinch as well. I think it's a little bit harder to defend Valentina's takedowns, or at least prepare for those, than the 1-2 from Grasso. and the fact that Valentina has been striking for a very long time, I think she has a better feeling of doing it, whereas Grasso doesn't have a wrestling background. And if Valentina doesn't do anything too crazy, like spins and goes for crazy submissions and stuff like that, I actually now do favor her to win the rematch. So with Valentina defeating Grasso in the immediate rematch, actually copying kind of how the whole Amanda Nunes situation went with Pena, both lost their belt, both got finished, both got rear naked choked, which is crazy, and then both getting it back. I think then who should fight her next? Maybe Blanchfield or Santos? I see her beating Santos. I actually see her beating Blanchfield too. Blanchfield getting on the ground though was dangerous, so Valentina would have to strike with her. It's actually very interesting how it all works out, all the different kind of styles here. Grasso's a striker with good submissions, but Valentina has a dominant top control against her, whereas for Blanchfield, Valentina does not want to go to the ground with her at all striking with her. So take down Grasso, some striking here and there, and when she goes up against Blanchfield, she wants to stay striking and no takedowns at all. So I do think that Valentina will hold the title by the end of the year. Then we go to the public questions. We start with YouTuber. Teddy Ellis tweeted during the Usman and Edwards 3 fight that a fighter gets 30% better once they become champion. Of course, it's not magic or anything and has a lot to do with confidence, but I think Leon literally looked 30% better that night, which was crazy. I was just curious about your take on the statement and if there's any truth to it at all. So I did talk about it a little bit. Yes, that sometimes is true because it is all on confidence. You become champ, the world changes for you, you have more opportunities and stuff like that. You're so much more positive, have a different level of confidence because you actually got it. There's a difference between thinking you have what it takes to become a champ and then actually having what it takes to become a champ. It's a whole different thing. So I think it can be true, but I also do think that some fighters, if you lose the belt, you can lose the confidence too. So they can look 30% worse. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes it's easy to look just at the positives of a fighter winning, but sometimes you have to also look at the negatives of a fighter losing and how that affects his mindset too. Yes, Leon did look better, but also Usman didn't look as good either. 30% is not a real thing. I think we're just using that 30% to mean, oh, they got better or they got more confident. But I think both was kind of true for that Usman and Leon fight. We've actually seen examples of the opposite happening, like the Max Holloway and Volkanovski fight. When Volk won the belt against Max and they rematched, Volk did not look that much better in the second fight. In fact, Max looked way better than he did from the first fight, which is actually pretty interesting. And also with Brennan Moreno and Figgy. Brennan Moreno looked way better after the draw than Figgy did in the rematch. And then Figgy looked better in the third fight after losing the belt. And then Brennan Moreno looked even better after the third fight when he lost the belt. Sometimes it takes a loss to kick you into the next gear. For some fighters, it helps them learn way better. So it's not a universal thing where every fighter who wins the belt just gets better. That's not true. Some fighters just stay the same. Some fighters even get worse. Some fighters do get better. And as for fighters losing, sometimes they get way better. Sometimes they get worse. Can I think of an example of a fighter who got the belt and performed worse? Tony Ferguson. After Tony won the belt against Kevin Lee, he didn't perform as good, but I think it's more to do with the injury than anything about confidence from winning the belt. Cody Garbrandt's another one. He didn't perform as good after winning the belt. Michael Bisping, actually, which is a really interesting one. Michael's actually performing better when he fought like Anderson Silva and when he beat Luke Rockhold than when he did when he fought Dan Henderson. Because that Dan Henderson rematch should have been way easier than it was. The guy was nearly 50 years old. And he was getting knocked all over the place. Like Dan Henderson didn't have a chin anymore. All he had was a right hand. Most champions in middleweight history would have destroyed that version of Dan Henderson easily with no problems. And Michael was performing way better before that happened. Way better before that fight. And he didn't perform as good against GSP either. All he had against GSP were some elbows from the bottom. Everywhere else, he was getting pretty much dominated. And it was a position that GSP kind of left himself a little too relaxed in. I don't think he expected to get elbowed from the bottom because honestly, it was actually very new to him in his career. I think Carl's kind of attempted some of it, but in the newer landscape of MMA that GSP wasn't used to, guys actually attacking off their back with elbows, Tony Ferguson really brought that to life. GSP didn't seem like he was ready for it at all. And that was really all Michael Bisping had for him, a new technique that GSP wasn't prepared for. Other than that, he was getting dominated. It might have something to do with the fact that, he was chasing the belt for such a long time, and once he got it, it was kind of like a sign of relief, and he was ready to just retire soon. And then with the Logan Scott, loving all the analysis, man. A couple things. Number one, top 10 fighters with one massive flaw that brings their game down. For an example, Chito and Yan being slow starters, Usman with no Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, etc. And then number two, with Gaethje's win over Fiziev, when will these older lightweights start getting beat out by the newer age lightweights? anything the older guys can do to stop this, older guys meaning Gaethje, Poirier, Chandler, Dariush, etc. Those are actually really good questions. Fighters with massive flaws that bring their games down. Adesanya's takedown defense in the center of the octagon is a huge weakness, and I honestly think sometimes he purposely backs up to the fence even more when someone pressures him, rather than trying to resist the pressure and then get taken down in the center. I think he purposely backs up to the fence sometimes to defend takedowns easier, but in the center of the octagon, he gets taken down way too easily. You know, Jan showed that, Whitaker showed that, I think even Vettori took him down in the center, which is crazy. Charles Oliveira doesn't move his head. Shavkat doesn't move his head. Stipe, lack of defense out of the clinch. We haven't seen it get capitalized on yet, but Leon giving his back up when he's trying to stand up. He's done that so often. Sometimes he does have good control of the wrist, and that's when he does it, but then there are times where he just literally just tries to stand up. So far, he hasn't fought these really good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys that takes advantage of that. Fiziev not pacing himself well. Gaethje should be wrestling more than he does. Chandler doesn't compose himself, goes too crazy in fights. I mean, I guess that is a strength to attract Conor McGregor to a fight. It's actually crazy because I was trying to think of Volk. I was trying to think of Corey Sandhagen. I was trying to think of Brennan Moreno. Like, I was trying to think of these more well-rounded guys. And if they have, like, a massive weakness, and it's insane how good they are. Like, they don't even have, like, a massive flaw. They are so technical, man. They're so good. And then the older lightweights, yeah, they've actually been beating the newer guys. Now, the newer lightweights are not that old, so they still have some time to make it somewhere, especially someone like Arman Tsarukyan. But Fiziev, Gamrot have all lost to... It's no wonder they were part of the best weight class in the UFC for such a long time. It's no wonder not only were they part of the best weight class in the UFC for such a long time, they made it the best weight class in the UFC. But I still think Fiziev, Arman, Gamrot, and maybe Jalen Turner can still turn things around and make their way up there. I would like to say Guram Kutaladze, but the guy just doesn't fight. He's getting injuries and stuff like that. He can't stay healthy, but he absolutely had what it took to be up there too. He only has 2 UFC fights. Such a shame, man. And he's not young either. He's one of the older guys that were coming up. But it does look like the new age lightweights are only going to beat the older ones when the older ones start getting over the hill. Gaethje, Poirier, Chandler, Dariush, all are in their prime still. By the time they get out of their prime, I think that's when the new age lightweights will beat them. I guess Islam Makhachev, would he be considered a new age lightweight? If we consider him one, at least he made it up there. But the others are still following suit. I think it's inevitable for Arman Tsarukyan to get there. The guy is just so good and he's like 25 years old or whatever. But everybody else has to catch up. And I think that's when it's going to happen when the others fall off. Then we go to the level beyond human. Thoughts on the Israel Adesanya versus Khamzat Chimaev matchup? Should Khamzat have to fight at least one ranked middleweight opponent or get fast-tracked? And who do you think wins and why? Yes, Khamzat needs one win in the top 5 before he gets a title shot. And how does he do against Israel Adesanya? Yeah, I do think Khamzat should have one win in the top 5 before he fights Adesanya, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets fast-tracked, especially if Costa, in fact, did turn down the fight. But the story of it is, Khamzat's a horrible fight for Adesanya. The worst fight in the whole division for Adesanya. The best wrestler with great submission ability. He could take you down in the center. He could take you down against the fence. He can trip you on the clinch. He's a big, strong guy, very physical. He goes crazy in the first round to get you down there and submit you. Adesanya makes a lot of mistakes when he's on the bottom. His changing of levels is some of the fastest I've ever seen, and Adesanya's gonna have a hard time seeing those coming. Now, if Adesanya can survive the first 2 rounds, as Khamzat's going ballistic to finish him, I can see how the fight turns around. Because it is a pretty sticky game plan for Khamzat to choose. Does he want to go crazy in the early rounds and try to get that early finish? It is probably the best way he could succeed in getting that submission against Adesanya. When Adesanya doesn't have any time to think, calculate anything, download data, he has to just purely go off of his grappling skill. But if he doesn't get that submission in the first 2 rounds, Adesanya might start picking him apart, and Adesanya hits really hard. Now, if he goes with the other game plan of being more composed, picking out his shots first, standing up with Adesanya here and there, it's actually probably a worse game plan. I think Khamzat might have to go really hard early on Adesanya to get that early finish. Yeah, so I do think Khamzat would beat Adesanya, especially 100% if he doesn't gas out. If Khamzat has the kind of cardio to go at a fast grappling pace for 5 rounds, Adesanya is done for. Like, he has to bank on Khamzat gassing out. Or the thing that any striker could do, intercept a takedown with a knee or something. That's always going to be the thing for every single striker on the planet when they're fighting a wrestler. But other than that, if Khamzat doesn't gas out and he knows how to compose himself in the grappling, he dominates Adesanya. Because what is Adesanya going to do? Does he want to back himself to the fence to defend it better? But Khamzat's excellent there. In fact, he's actually better with his takedowns against the fence. He has the trips now. He has a double leg. He can switch to a single. He changes the direction he wants to take you down with. It's easier to get that Dagestani handcuff up against the fence too. He will use the fence against Adesanya from standing up, get on top of him, trap him there, laying big ground and pound shots. Because actually, if you realize, Khamzat does most of his ground and pound when he gets the takedowns against the fence. He doesn't do as much ground and pound in the center because he's really good, just like Khabib and just like Islam Makhachev and these other good Dagestani and Chechen wrestlers. He's very good at using the fence against you, and you really have nowhere to go. You have to defend yourself. He can rain down fire, and you have to address it. You can't look to stand up from that position. You have to defend yourself. And if you turn over to give up your back, which is something that a lot of fighters do against that ground and pound, now he gets the Dagestani handcuff or he gets your back to choke you out. It's a kind of pace with a huge amount of variety of attacks that Adesanya is not used to. I mean, he's wrestled with Jan Blachowicz. What did Jan do? Took him down, sat in half guard and side control and didn't do much. What did Whitaker do, right? He took him down, didn't have good top control. Adesanya was able to stand up immediately, right? Khamzat brings a whole different level to all of this that no one that Adesanya has fought comes even close to him with. Stylistically, it's a nightmare of a fight for Adesanya. But as long as it stays on the feet, Khamzat is target practice. Then we get to Ted J. A few questions. Number one, Poatan versus 205 top brass. I think he beats Jamal Hill, beats Yuri Prohaska, loses to Ankalaev, Jan Blachowicz, and Rakic, and then beats Anthony Smith. Number two, Khamzat's path to Izzy / title. So he could get that immediate title shot if no one's accepting the fight. If someone does accept it, I think he should fight either Whitaker or Paulo Costa. Those make the most sense for him, in my opinion. I think he loses to Whitaker, and I think he has a very close fight with Costa, but beats him there. I actually think he could hurt Costa on the striking, and I think mixing up the wrestling would be a bit too much for Costa to keep up with. Both guys don't have the best cardio, but I do think Khamzat would have better cardio. And off of whatever he wins there, if he beats Costa or beats Whitaker, he's going to get a title shot. He's too big of a star. The division's too lacking right now. It leaves that window wide open for him. Number three, is Edwards shooting himself in the foot by not already promoting his fight with Colby and beefing? Yeah, man, these champions, when they have these kind of fights that can sell really well, I don't know why they want to go so against it sometimes. Like him saying, oh, Colby doesn't deserve it, I'm not going to accept the fight. That only makes him look bad. If you look at it from like a pure business standpoint, like promotion-wise and getting the fans excited for you, that does not make Colby look bad. That only makes you look bad, because what's anybody going to say against Colby if you're saying I'm not going to accept the fight? Fans are not going to say Colby doesn't deserve it. No casual fan at least is going to say that. So you have to play it up with that kind of audience. More likely to happen if a champion says I'm not going to fight that guy is that they're going to say you're scared. I mean, look at a lot of people saying that Adesanya is scared of Pereira, even though he just beat him. Now imagine with Edwards, who didn't even fight Colby ever, is saying that he doesn't want to fight Colby. It's only going to make people think that he's scared of him, which of course he's not, but he should absolutely play into the promotion more. Not like play a character, but at least give the fans what they want with his own personality, right? He did the whole thing with Usman with the headshot stuff and giving those short but well-delivered answers in the press conference. Like that kind of stuff is really good, and he should be doing the same thing with Colby. And now he's also saying he wants to move the fight to Abu Dhabi or something. Like, I don't know why he hates money. He wants to fight Belal Muhammad so bad. And honestly, even the people that advocate for Belal to fight Leon Edwards, most of them are not even going to watch that fight. So I don't even understand why Leon is pushing more to that, other than, you know, the purity of the sport, like keeping the contendership going and stuff like that. I understand the whole aspect of it. But in his position, like imagine if you're Leon. That's where I'm seeing this from. I'm not looking at it from my perspective. I'm looking at it from Leon's perspective. If I was the welterweight champion, I would not be wanting to call Belal Muhammad out over Colby. If Colby's the option, and even the organization wants Colby there, I am going to promote that fight too. Like, I'm going to be like, all right, it's the biggest fight. I'm going to make the most money off of this. Everybody's going to watch this fight. Whereas only 2 people are going to be watching me for Belal Muhammad. He should definitely be promoting this, playing it up more, because it's going to happen. We've heard it many times already. Colby's going to fight Leon. Leon should just accept it at this point. He said he's taking on all comers. Well, he has a comer here, and now he just doesn't want him. He should take all comers. He has his next opponent now, and he should focus on it now. Your fourth question, with Rosas losing to C-Rod and him talking past his opponents, could he be the next Sage Northcutt? I don't think so. He's better than Sage Northcutt. So ever since Sage Northcutt came into the UFC, I always knew he was very athletic, of course. He had some decent striking. He was very tenacious in there. But I never thought of Sage Northcutt of being anything like top 10 or, anything like that. With Rosas Jr., I can absolutely see him going somewhere. At least being better than Sage Northcutt. He has the skill. He has the technique. He has all that stuff. He made a rookie mistake of going way too hard in the beginning against C-Rod and thinking he could submit him early on. Where C-Rod is actually a good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist, which is something I mentioned. He gassed himself out after that first round, or it was like in the middle of the second, if I remember. Everything went downhill. He was trying too hard at one thing instead of mixing it up and being crafty everywhere. And I think once he does that, like he's very disciplined with his approach. I think Rosas can beat a lot of guys, man. He's a very good fighter. He's only 18 years old. And Daniel Cormier, I believe, said that he's really going to turn this guy into a monster because he has the raw talent. That's the thing. He has the talent that everybody can see. Yes, Rosas is an 18-year-old and everybody wants to see an 18-year-old do well, but it's not just that. Everybody sees that the guy has talent. Like, he's actually good. Whereas Sage Northcutt was just kind of athletic and he threw hard punches. Sage also didn't have that kind of competitive personality that Rosas Jr. has, right? Rosas saying that he wants to beat all these guys and he's going to be like a triple champ and all this stuff. You know where his mindset is leading to. Like, you know which direction he's looking at for his career, whereas Sage never did that. Sage always seemed kind of a guy that wasn't too competitive in nature. You know, oftentimes when fighters say there are athletes in the sport and there are fighters, Sage Northcutt was not necessarily like a fighter like that. He was more of an athlete that was good at fighting. Whereas Rosas has a fighting mentality, and he's also an athlete. It's a different mindset between those two guys. And then number 5, what's the state of women's MMA currently in the UFC? I think it's fine. The divisions are different from each other. Like, bantamweight is really lacking right now. Like, strawweight and flyweight are doing pretty well. Flyweight's doing better than it's ever been before. So that's in a really good state. Strawweight's always been the best. Like, it's always been exciting, especially with Rose, Zhang Weili, and some other fighters up there too. Marina Rodriguez is really nice to watch. Women's bantamweight needs someone new. We're getting the third fight with Pena. I expect Nunes to continue what she did in the second fight. But other than that, yeah, women's MMA in totality is doing pretty well. They just don't have that big megastar that Ronda Rousey was. But they don't need it. I mean, of course it helps, but they don't need it necessarily. They're with the Pedro Carrera. I tried. Hi, Weasel. Number 1, what is your top 5 rankings of each division outside the top 15? I'm thinking of guys like Barberina and Bobby Green. And number 2, you could make any fights with the current roster. Tell us your best possible pay-per-view main card and name 3 or 4 more fights for the prelims. Love from Portugal. Shout out to Portugal, man, and thank you for the questions. Top 5 rankings outside the top 15. So pretty much number 16 and number 20 of each division. Okay, for heavyweight, I mean, it could be anybody. So I would say Marcos Rogério de Lima is one of them. Andrei Arlovski has to be in there. Carl Williams, maybe Justin Tafa, and Chris Barnett. For the light heavyweight division, I would say Modestas Bukauskas, Devin Clark, Ian Cutelaba, Alonzo Menafield, and Khalil Roundtree. For the middleweight division, Eric Anders, Gerald Mearshart, Mikhail Alexiochuk, Gregory Rodriguez, Edmund Shabazian, and Brad Tavares. Now for welterweight, Brian Barberina, Gunnar Nelson, Randy Brown, Max Griffin, and also throw in Kevin Holland. Welterweight definitely has some really good guys outside the top 15, but lightweight's probably on top there. So you're going to have Matt Fravola, Gregor Gillespie. Wait, what happened to Gillespie? You got to put in Bobby Green. Hanato Moicano has to be there. And Thiago Moises. There's some really good guys outside the top 15 at lightweight. Now for featherweight, you're going to have Joshua Coulibaugh, Julian Erosa, Nathaniel Wood. And the only reason why I'll have Nathaniel Wood is because he did beat Charles Jourdain. And Charles Jourdain is probably right there too. So that win is huge for him for the rankings. Nate Landwehr has to be there. That guy's like blowing up all of a sudden. Everyone's on the Nate train. I think Lerone Murphy has an argument to be there too. For the bantamweight division, you're going to have Javid Basharat. Cody Garbrandt has to be somewhere there. Davey Grant, 100%. He's doing so well right now. I actually think his next fight should be a top 15. You might put in Kyler Phillips, and Cody Stamen is probably still there because he just was in the top 15. And then for the flyweight division, Tyson Nam, Jake Hadley for sure, and even above him for sure, Alan Nascimento. He has a win over Jake Hadley. He also beat Carlos Hernandez, who I think possibly is even outside the top 15. I would also throw in Nate Menace and Jeffrey Molina. There are some other guys you can argue there, but outside the top 15 is okay. And then for your second question, I've answered that on the last podcast, or it was 2 podcasts ago. One of the two. And then last question, we're going to go to Eamon Hearn. If Blachowicz could make 185 to fight Izzy, what weaknesses do you think the weight cut could allow Izzy to exploit? Some of the power would have to be gone, and for sure physical grappling strength from the massive difference of cutting 20 more pounds would diminish Jan Blachowicz. Izzy could press the gas more instead of allowing Jan to use his technical defense. Because Jan is definitely going to have a weaker chin, and he would not be able to fight at a faster pace because he would start to gas out in the later rounds. So Izzy would have to force Jan to have to rely on his physicality by pressing the action more. Because Jan will always have his skills intact. He'll always be able to block the shots, check the kicks, and fight at a slower pace. That would be his kind of fight at a hypothetical 185. Jan can still win the fight if Izzy fights the way he fought before, by going at a slow pace, feinting and throwing leg kicks. He would have to kind of fight him how he fought Pereira this last time, or like Kelvin Gastelum. And Pereira also cut a massive amount of weight to go into that fight, probably weaken his chin as well. And that's the end of the podcast, guys. So hope you guys enjoyed it. I could go on much longer, actually. But hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to give this a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video.